Welcome back to the channel, the place where truckers finally say the things they've been too scared to put on the radio. Out past the last gas station, the dark doesn't just surround you, it watches you. Before we roll, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you're here every time another real story comes out of the night. And when this story ends, go straight to the comments and tell me two things: where you're listening from, and what you think really happened out there. I read every one. Your theories keep this road and this channel alive. I still don't know why I took that route. Most guys run I-80 when they're pushing through Nevada, but I've been running late out of Vegas and the dispatcher wanted the load in Reno fast. My GPS suggested NV375 as a shortcut, and I figured, why not? I'd heard the nickname the Extraterrestrial Highway, but to me, roads are roads. Asphalt, mile markers, fuel stops, white lines. I don't scare easy, and I don't buy into UFO stories. That was before that night, anyway. My name's Evan. I've been driving long haul for 12 years. Tankers, reefers, flatbeds, you name it. I've done ice roads in Montana, whiteouts in Wyoming, even black ice in Colorado Canyon passes. I'm not a rookie, and I don't panic over nothing. It was 2:14 a.m. when it started. I remember the exact time because I just glanced at the dash clock, annoyed that the digits were burning into my eyes. My eyelids felt like sandpaper. The road between Tonopah and that lonely stretch of 375 is the kind of darkness that feels heavy, like a blanket pressed over your face. No towns, no rest stops, just scrub brush, rock, and the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. My headlights carved two pale tunnels through the desert, picking out the reflective posts along the shoulder. The sky above was moonless, but clear, a black dome with more stars than I'd ever seen. The air conditioner hummed low. The cab smelled like old coffee, diesel, and the cheap lemon air freshener I'd hung on the mirror. I was somewhere between songs on a classic rock station that kept fading in and out. Static, half a verse, more static. I was reaching to tap the radio when something bright caught the edge of my vision. First, I thought it was a shooting star, a white streak cutting through the sky, then slowing. That's what made my hands tighten on the wheel. Stars don't slow down. This did. Ahead and slightly to the right, over the desert, a light hovered. Pure white. Not like a plane's blinking NAV light or a helicopter's search beam. It was clean, sharp, almost painful to look at. Then another light joined it. Then a third. 3 white orbs just hanging in the air above the scrubland, maybe a mile off the road, maybe less. Depth is hard to judge in that kind of darkness. I lifted my foot off the accelerator, letting the rig coast. They weren't moving fast. They drifted, almost lazily, like they were scanning the ground. Down, left, right. One dipped low, close to the desert floor, then glided back up to rejoin the others. No sound, no rotor thump, no jet whine. My windows were up, but I know the difference between seeing and hearing aircraft. There was nothing. The hair on my arms stood up. I don't know why I did it, but I eased the truck onto the shoulder, hazard lights clicking on. Dust rose in a gray cloud around me, backlit by my own headlights. I put the transmission in neutral, set the brake, and killed the engine. Instant silence. No engine rumble. No fan. No radio. Just the tick-tick-tick of cooling metal and the soft hiss of wind sliding over the cab. When you shut a big rig off out there, the quiet hits different. Feels wrong, like you've cut off your life support. The lights were still there. I cracked my driver's window. Cold desert air rushed in, dry and sharp, carrying the smell of dust and something else. A faint metallic tang, like hot electronics or ozone after a lightning strike. I leaned forward over the steering wheel, squinting. Then one of the orbs broke away. It separated from the other two and began drifting toward the highway. Toward me. Not fast, not jerky. Just a slow, deliberate glide, like it had made up its mind. That's when my radio exploded. 1 second, just low static. The next, a wall of noise slammed into the cab. Not normal static either. This was violent, shrieking, a shredding sound that drilled straight into my skull. It felt like someone had jammed broken glass into both my ears and was grinding it in. I flinched, instinctively reaching for the volume knob, But the moment my fingers touched it, a bolt of pain shot up my arm, like an electric shock. The hairs on the back of my hand stood straight up. Jesus! I yanked my hand back and slapped the power button instead. The radio didn't turn off. The display went blank, but the sound kept coming, louder, teeth rattling. Like the noise was inside my head now. Then something bumped my trailer. Just a small thud at first, like a gust of wind had hit it sideways. But the night was still. Then came another impact closer to the cab. A heavy, deliberate thump that vibrated through the seat and into my spine. The frame groaned. Footsteps. That's the only way I can describe it. Heavy, measured steps moving along the side of the trailer, from back to front. Metal flexed with each impact. The whole rig shivered slightly in time with them. Something was walking along my trailer. My mouth went dry. I forced myself to look into the side mirror. Darkness. The hazard lights pulsed red on the asphalt, catching only dust and empty shoulder. No shapes, no movement, but the steps kept coming, slow and steady, drawing nearer to the cab. My chest tightened with each one. The approaching orb was closer now, maybe 50 yards out, hovering above the shoulder, level with the top of my cab. Up close, it wasn't just a circle of light. It had depth like a perfectly smooth glowing sphere. The white was so intense it left streaks in my vision when I blinked. The static rose to a piercing whine. The steps reached the gap between cab and trailer and stopped. For a heartbeat, everything held still. The lights, the sound, even the wind. Then the orb dropped. It moved in a straight vertical line. No arcing, no wobble, just a clean drop until it hung directly in front of my truck. Maybe 10 feet off the ground and only a few feet from my grill. The world went white. The light flooded through the windshield, searing into my eyes. I threw up an arm, but it didn't help much. Every dust mote in the cab glowed. The plastic dashboard turned ghostly pale. The steering wheel under my fingers felt hot, like it had been left out in the sun. And in that whiteout, I saw it. First, I thought it was a shadow. A tall, thin smudge in the middle of the glare, right in front of my bumper. Then my eyes adjusted just enough to see shape and edges. It was standing inches from my grill. Too tall. 7 feet, maybe more. Limbs too long, joints just slightly wrong, like someone had tried to assemble a person from memory and got the proportions off. The skin, if it was skin, looked smooth and colorless under the light, almost reflective. Its torso was narrow, ribs suggested under a surface that didn't seem to breathe. It had arms. Long, thin arms that hung almost to where knees would be on a human. Each hand ended in 3 overly long fingers, jointed once, then again too many segments. They were spread slightly, as if feeling the air. The head was the worst. Elongated, tapering at the chin, no hair, no ears that I could see. Where eyes should have been were 2 deep, vertical slits that glowed faintly from within, like embers smoldering behind frosted glass. They weren't blinking, they just focused. On me. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my throat, but my body refused to respond. Every instinct screamed at me to throw the truck into gear and floor it, crush whatever that thing was under 8,000 pounds of steel and rubber. But I sat there, hand frozen on the wheel, as those not eyes stared straight through the glass. The static shifted. It dropped from a shriek to a low, pulsing hum. Not random, not noisy. Rhythmic. Patterns of sound, rising and falling in precise intervals. My fillings buzzed. The air in the cab felt thick, charged, like right before a thunderstorm, but amplified 100 times. My nose started to bleed. I felt a warm trickle slide over my upper lip and drip onto my hand. Still, I couldn't move. Those 3-fingered hands twitched once, twice, as if tasting the air. The thing tilted its head, just slightly, the slits narrowing. And then, like someone flipped a switch, everything cut out. Silence. Blackness. The orb vanished. The static died mid-pulse. My headlights were the only light left, shining on an empty stretch of highway. My ears rang with the absence of sound. The figure was gone. 1 second it had been there, inches from my truck. The next, nothing. No retreating footsteps. No blur of movement, just empty air and the hollow echo of my own ragged breathing. I don't remember turning the key, but the engine roared back to life. I slammed the truck into gear and pulled out onto the highway, gravel crunching under my tires. My hands were shaking so badly the wheel jumped under my grip. I pushed the accelerator harder than I should have, watching the speedometer climb. In the mirror, the two distant orbs still hovered over the desert. They weren't following me. They were just hanging there, watching. I didn't look back again. By the time dawn smeared a pale line across the horizon behind me, my head ached like I'd gone 10 rounds with a jackhammer. My nose had stopped bleeding, but there were rusty streaks down the front of my shirt. Every so often, my radio would pop with a soft, single crackle, like it wanted to come back to life and thought better of it. I hit a small truck stop outside of Reno after sunrise. The place smelled like bacon grease, burnt coffee, and old cigarette smoke. Comforting, normal smells. I parked, killed the engine, and just sat there a minute, letting the mundane morning seep in through the glass. Part of me wanted to chalk the whole thing up to fatigue, sleep deprivation, desert mirage, anything but what it had looked like. Then I climbed down and walked around to the front of my truck. The dust on the hood was thick from the night's drive. It should have been a smooth film of beige grit, disturbed only where my hands usually rested or where bugs had splattered. Instead, I saw them, prints. 3 long, recessed impressions in the dust, each the length of my middle finger and twice as deep as my fingertips could press. 3 side-by-side grooves arranged like claw marks, but too purposeful. For sets of them across the hood, like something had rested both of its hands there and pushed down. I pressed my own hand into the dust next to them. My fingers looked stubby by comparison. Human. These were not. I didn't say anything to the waitress. What was I supposed to do? Ask if they'd had any tall, skeletal customers with glowing slit eyes recently. I ate my eggs in silence, fingers still tingling, ears picking up every flicker of static from the radio behind the counter. When I got back in the truck, my CB display was still dead, but the speaker crackled once, softly. 3 pulses. Long, short, long, like a pattern. That was a month ago. Since then, every night around 2:14 a.m., wherever I am, my CB comes alive. The display stays dark, but the static starts. Not as loud as that first night, but insistent. Sometimes it's just a low hum. Sometimes it rises and falls in those same measured patterns. I've started writing them down, lines and dots on napkins and logbook margins. Feels like a signal. A few nights back, I woke up in my sleeper berth to that sound. The cab was freezing despite the heater being on. My breath fogged in front of my face. The static pulsed in that same 3-beat rhythm over and over. When I finally worked up the nerve to peek through the curtain and look out the windshield, there was nothing. Just my own reflection. But the dust on the inside of the windshield, dust that shouldn't even be there, had 3 long streaks dragged through it. From the top of the glass down to the dash. Like something had traced along it from the other side. I've cleaned it 3 times. Keeps coming back. People always ask truckers for stories. Wild weather. Crazy drivers. Close calls. I've got plenty. But this is the one I don't tell at truck stops. I'm telling you because I need someone else to know it's real. That those prints were real. That the signal is still going. I'm parked outside a warehouse right now, engine off, waiting for a dock door to open. It's dark. My phone says 2:13 a.m. The CB just crackled. 3 pulses. Long, short, long. Out of habit, my eyes flick to the side mirror, then to the windshield. For a second, I swear I see a faint glow wash over the hood, like distant lightning. If I turn the key and fire up the engine, maybe it'll stop. Maybe I'll drown it out with diesel and miles. Pretend it never happened. But I know when I step out to check my load in the morning, there'll be fresh marks in the dust. 3 fingers, pressed deep, like something still trying to get a better look at me. I've been running nights for most of my career. Some guys hate the graveyard shift, but there's a piece to it that I've always liked. Less traffic, fewer idiots, more time to think. Out there, it's just you, the road, and whatever your headlights decide to show you. My name's Mark. I've been hauling freight up and down the western states for almost 15 years. I've seen my share of weird, strange lights, drunk drivers, accidents that looked like murder scenes, but I always had some kind of explanation. Fatigue, bad weather, tricks of the eye. Truckers talk a lot of crap at diners, but I've always thought of myself as the practical one. This happened about a year ago on State Route 361 in Nevada, a stretch I hadn't run often. Dispatcher routed me from Tonopah up toward Fallon with a stop at Hawthorne. I remember grumbling about it when I fueled up. Those smaller desert highways aren't forgiving. No light, no shoulder in some spots, no help if something goes wrong. It was around 1 a.m. when I hit that long, empty run on 361. If you've never driven the desert at night, it's hard to explain the darkness. Cities have a glow, even when you're miles away. Out there, though, the sky turns into this endless black ocean, and your truck is a tiny ship cutting through it with two pale beams. The stars were clear that night, sharper than you ever see in town, but they didn't feel comforting. They felt far away, cold. The air conditioner hummed low. I cracked the window an inch to stay awake, letting in the dry chill. The air smelled like dust and old asphalt, with a faint hint of sagebrush. My thermos coffee had gone lukewarm and bitter, but I kept sipping it anyway. The tires droned on the road, a steady rhythm that could lull you right to sleep if you weren't careful. I was somewhere in the middle of that nothing when I saw her. If I hadn't looked at that exact moment, I might have missed her completely. My high beams swept over the right shoulder, and for half a second I thought I was looking at a reflector or sign. Then it moved. She stepped out of the dark like she'd been cut out of it. A woman, standing on the shoulder on my side of the road. Pale dress, falling straight down to her ankles, the fabric catching the light like it was almost glowing. Long dark hair pulled back, I thought, though it was hard to see details at first. She was waving both arms over her head, frantic, like someone trying to flag down a lifeboat in rough seas. My foot was already hitting the brake before my brain caught up. You don't leave someone out there. Not in the middle of nowhere. Not at that hour. My rig shuddered as it slowed, the trailer whispering against the pavement, brakes sighing. Gravel spit under the tires as I eased to a stop about 50 yards past her. For a second, all I could hear was the ticking of cooling metal, my own breathing, and the distant hiss of wind over the desert. I checked my mirrors. She was walking toward the truck, quick but not running. White dress moving around her legs in the airflow I'd left behind. My headlights washed over her as she approached, and that's when the details started registering. The dress was spotless. White, not cream or off-white, but bright white like something straight off a rack. No dust on the hem, no dirt on her bare arms. Her hair was neat, pulled into a low bun at the nape of her neck. She could have been heading to a rehearsal dinner, not standing on the side of a desert highway at 1 in the morning. I felt a little prickle go up the back of my neck, but I leaned over and popped the passenger door anyway. "Ma'am." My voice sounded loud in the cab. "You need a ride?" She climbed up without a word at first, one hand catching the grab bar, the other gathering her dress carefully so it wouldn't snag. That detail stuck with me. How careful she was about the fabric, like it really mattered. She slid onto the passenger seat, closed the door gently behind her, and folded her hands in her lap. Up close, she looked like she was in her late 20s, early 30s, tops. Pretty, but not in a movie way, more like you'd see working at a bank or a school. Her skin looked pallid in the dashboard glow, but that could have been the lighting. Light makeup, simple silver earrings, a small, delicate ring on her left hand. Her eyes were what got me. They were wide and dark, and there was something behind them, a kind of stunned exhaustion, like someone who'd been crying for hours and run out of tears. "I'm headed toward Hawthorne," I said, easing back onto the road. "You going that way?" She nodded, finally speaking. Her voice was soft but clear, with a faint rasp like she'd been yelling earlier. "Yes, Hawthorne. Please. Thank you for stopping." "No problem." The truck settled back into its groove, engine rumbling, desert sliding past in the beam of the headlights. "Rough night." She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. You could say that. Now that she was in the cab, I realized something else. She didn't smell like anything that belonged out there. Not sweat, not dust, not fear. There was a faint scent of flowers and powder, like an older-fashioned perfume. It cut weirdly through the usual aromas of the cab. Coffee, grease, old fast food. Car breakdown? I asked after a moment. She shook her head slowly, eyes on the road ahead. No. I was left. Left. She didn't answer immediately. The dash lights painted her hands a soft green, and I saw she was twisting that ring on her finger over and over, turning it, stopping, turning it back. It looked like a wedding band. Simple gold, small stone. I needed to get to Hawthorne, she said finally. I thought he'd take me there, but he changed his mind. Who did? She swallowed. I heard it, that little click in the quiet cab. He's still out there. The way she said it made the temperature feel like it dropped 10 degrees. I glanced at the thermostat, same as before, but my fingertips suddenly felt colder on the wheel. Who's still out there? I asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes tracked something out in the darkness, like she could see past the reach of my headlights. The desert outside was a blur of gray and black and scrub, but the way she stared made me feel like there was something more out there, just beyond what I could see. Look, I tried again, keeping my voice gentle. If someone hurt you, I can call ahead. Let the sheriff know. They'll... Please don't call him. Her voice sharpened, just for a second. Not loud, but edged. Please, I just need to get to Hawthorne. All right? I said, backing off. All right, we'll get you there. We fell into a heavy silence. The road hummed. The cab creaked occasionally as the suspension shifted. My wipers squeaked once across a dry windshield, a pointless swipe triggered by some electronic glitch. The hairs on my arms stayed standing. I snuck a glance at her. She was watching me now, not like someone making polite conversation, but like someone sizing me up. Her head tilted just a little, eyes tracking the movement of my hands on the wheel, my jaw clenching, the way I shifted in the seat. For a heartbeat, I had this crazy feeling like I was the one who'd been picked up, not her. How long were you out there? I asked, more to break the tension than anything. Her gaze slid back to the windshield. A while. Couple hours? A while, she repeated, quieter. Something in her tone made me shut up. I focused on the road, on the white lines sliding under me, on the distant signs announcing how far to Hawthorne. 15 miles. 10. Eventually, I realized I couldn't hear her breathing. That sounds dumb, but it's the little things you notice when you've spent too many nights alone in a cab. Usually, when someone's riding shotgun, you hear them shifting, sighing, adjusting, checking their phone. She'd been so still, that faint flower smell the only reminder she was there. Now even that scent felt faded. Cleared my throat. Hawthorne's not far now. You got someone waiting for you there? Silence. I glanced over. The passenger seat was empty. My heart lurched so hard I almost jerked the wheel. The seatbelt was still buckled into its clip, lying flat against the upholstery. The door was closed. No sound. No lingering weight. No impression in the seat cushion like someone had just been sitting there. Just nothing. I checked the sleeper behind me. Even though I knew she hadn't moved, I would have heard it. No one. I even leaned across, one hand still on the wheel, and cracked the passenger door, looking down at the steps, the darkness rushing past. There was no way she could have opened it and climbed down without me hearing the air suck in. The wind slammed the door, but she was gone. I drove the rest of the way to Hawthorne with my stomach knotted and hands slick on the wheel, every mile dragging. My brain scrambled for explanations. I'd nodded off. I'd hallucinated. Stress, caffeine, isolation. Maybe I'd never picked anyone up at all, and my mind had filled the cab with a ghost that wasn't there. Except, the seatbelt had been clicked into place. I was sure of it. The truck stop at Hawthorne glowed like an island when I finally pulled in. Sodium lights buzzing, a few rigs lined up, the smell of diesel, frying oil, and cigarette smoke thick in the air. That stupid familiarity almost calmed me down. Noise, people, civilization. I parked, killed the engine, and just sat there, breathing hard. A knock on my door made me jump. I looked down, expecting some impatient dock guy. Instead, a middle-aged man in a khaki uniform stood there, hat in hand, Nye County, I guessed by the patch. Sheriff's deputy. His flashlight beam caught my face, then quickly dipped away, like he just confirmed something he didn't like. I rolled the window down halfway. "Everything okay, officer?" He studied me for a few seconds, the lines around his eyes deepening. "You just come up from 361? He asked. "Yeah, Tonopah Run." My voice sounded hoarse. He nodded slowly, like he'd already known the answer. "You pick anyone up out there tonight?" My mouth went dry. I hesitated, and that was apparently all he needed. "You picked up the Desert Bride, didn't you?" he said. A chill crawled down my back. "The what?" He jerked his thumb toward the truck stop building. "Come on. I want to show you something." It was warmer inside, but I couldn't shake the cold in my bones. The deputy led me over to a bulletin board near the bathrooms, cluttered with advertisements, local notices, and a faded cluster of missing posters. Yellowing paper, faces from different decades. He tapped one of them with 2 fingers. The picture was old, the colors washed out. A young woman in a white dress, standing stiffly next to a man in a cheap suit. Big hair, early 90s style. Her smile was small and polite, eyes a little nervous. I didn't need more than a second to recognize her. It was the woman from my passenger seat. "October 31st, 1993, the deputy said quietly. "Wedding night. They were supposed to drive up to Reno after a small reception in Tonopah. Never made it. We found the car later, off 361, rolled into a ditch. Groom's body was inside. Hers wasn't. My skin crawled. You never found her?" He shook his head. "Not for lack of trying." He looked up at me. "We get reports, though, every few years. Driver sees a woman in a white dress on the side of 361, asks for a ride to Hawthorne, says something about him still being out there, then vanishes before they make it into town." I stared at the poster. Someone had handwritten missing across the top in red that had long since turned rusty brown. The date glared at me. October 31st, 93. Halloween. I thought about the ring on her finger, the way she'd twisted it, the way she'd begged me not to call him, the way she'd watched the desert. "You don't believe me," I said, but it came out more like a question. The deputy sighed, tired in a way that had nothing to do with his shift. "I don't know what I believe anymore," he admitted, "but your face is the same as all the others who've seen her. Pale, shaking, looking like you drove through a ghost." He paused, then added, "If she talked about him still being out there, count yourself lucky she got out of your truck on her own." I didn't sleep in that cab. Not that night. I sat in the diner, nursing coffee until the sun started bleeding over the horizon, turning the windows dusty orange. When I finally walked back out to my rig, my legs felt like they were moving through water. The passenger door was still closed. The seatbelt lay neatly buckled. The seat was empty. On the floor mat, right where her feet would have been, lay something small and metallic. I bent down and picked it up. A simple gold ring with a tiny stone. Cold. Too cold. Like it had been sitting in ice, not in a cab all night. For a long moment, I just stood there, feeling its weight in my palm. When I looked back at the bulletin board on my next run through Hawthorne, the poster was still there. But someone had taped a small plastic sandwich bag next to it. Inside the bag was a photograph of that same ring, the one I'd left at the deputy's office. Now, every time I drive 361 at night, I find myself watching the shoulder a little too closely, waiting for that pale figure to step out of the dark again, waiting for that frantic wave, that soft voice, that faint flour and powder smell. And sometimes, when the clock on the dash hits 1 a.m. and the desert around me turns into that black ocean, I catch a flash of white in the corner of my eye. I don't stop anymore, but I can't shake the feeling that one of these nights, I won't get a choice, that I'll glance over and she'll already be sitting in the passenger seat, twisting that ring on her finger, whispering about someone still out there on that road. And this time, maybe she won't be the only one. I've always said the desert is honest. Storms, cities, mountains, those can surprise you. But the desert tells you what it is the second you step into it. Empty, hot, sharp, dangerous if you're stupid. No tricks. You misjudge it, that's on you. That's what I used to believe. Anyway, my name's Cole. I've been hauling freight out west for close to 17 years. I know every dull stretch of highway from Barstow to Boise. Every sad little town clinging to a gas station and a bar. I've blown tires in Death Valley, patched radiator hoses in 100-degree heat outside Winnemucca, and slept in my cab through dust storms that sounded like God sandblasting the earth. But what happened at Lita Junction? That's the one night I can't file under rough run or bad luck. It doesn't fit with anything I know about the world. It was late October, just after midnight. I was running an overnight from Las Vegas up toward Reno, light load, nothing special. Temperature outside had dropped hard once the sun went down. Crisp, dry cold that made the metal in the cab feel like it held a chill. The sky had been clear when I left Vegas, stars sharp enough to cut yourself on. Somewhere past Beatty, the world changed. I noticed it first in the way my headlights started to shrink. 1 minute I could see a good stretch of road ahead, shoulder, a bit of scrub on both sides. Next minute, something gray started swallowing the distance. Not dust, not rain. I know those. This was thicker, softer, like someone had pulled cotton across the highway. Fog. I remember actually saying it out loud. No way. Fog doesn't belong out there. Not that dense, not that sudden. But there it was, rolling in low and heavy across the blacktop, turning the beams from my headlights into short, jagged cones of light. It diffused everything, smeared the edges of the world. The line between pavement and desert blurred. My hands tightened on the wheel. I dropped a few miles per hour, more on instinct than anything. The road signs came up out of the murk super close, reflective paint flashing white before vanishing behind me. The cab felt smaller somehow, like the fog outside was pressing in on the glass. I'd been planning to push straight through, but the longer I drove in that thick gray soup, the more my eyes burned. My vision kept trying to focus on things that weren't there. Shapes in the fog, hints of movement just past the range of my lights. Fatigue does that to you. When I saw the sign for Lita Junction, rest area 1 mile, I felt a wash of relief I didn't want to admit to. Lita Junction isn't much. A wide spot where 266 meets 95. A couple of old buildings. A rundown little rest area with flickering lights and bad plumbing. But that night, it looked like sanctuary. I eased off the highway, tires crunching over the rumble strip, and followed the old access road. The fog was thicker down in the little dip where the rest stop sat, pooling like gray water. Sodium lights glowed above the lot, halos smeared out so badly they looked like dying suns. I parked near the edge, away from the only other vehicle there. A beat-up sedan with fog beating on its roof. Engine off, the sudden quiet felt wrong. Usually at a stop like that, you hear crickets, distant trucks, wind through scrub. That night, it was just muffled, like someone had thrown a blanket over the world. I sat for a second, listening to my own heartbeat, the faint ping of cooling metal. My bladder reminded me why I'd stopped. Fine. Quick bathroom break, splash some water on my face, back on the road. When I stepped out of the cab, the cold hit me. Not just cool desert night. This was colder, damp somehow, curling under my jacket and into my bones. The fog had texture to it, tiny droplets settling on my face, my hands, the shoulders of my shirt. It smelled faintly of wet concrete and something else. Old pipes, maybe. Stale water. The restroom building was a low cinder block thing, painted some color that had long since given up. The fluorescent lights over the entrance flickered, buzzing just loud enough to get under your skin. A couple of moths drifted lazily nearby, moving like they were underwater. Inside, it was too bright. The lights hummed overhead, harsh white bouncing off cracked tile and stained sinks. The air smelled like disinfectant and urine baked into concrete, with a sour edge of something that had died a long time ago and been washed, but not washed away. I stepped up to the sink, dropped my gaze to my own reflection out of habit. I looked like hell. Bloodshot eyes, 3-day stubble, a tired, worn-out guy in a faded hoodie. I cupped my hands under the faucet. The water came out first as a cough of brown, then clear. It was ice-cold, like mountain snow runoff. I splashed it on my face, the shock pulling a grunt out of me. That's when I felt it. You spend enough time living alone in a cab, you get a sixth sense for when someone's behind you. It might just be the way air shifts or the way your shoulders pick up on changes in the room. Whatever it is, every nerve in my back suddenly lit up. Someone was standing just behind me. I froze, water dripping from my chin into the sink, fingers numb under the faucet. The room felt smaller. The humming lights sounded louder. I lifted my head, slowly, eyes going to the mirror. He was there. Tall guy, taller than me by a good few inches, standing just behind my right shoulder. Dark trucker cap pulled low. Old denim jacket worn at the seams. Skin kind of gray in the fluorescent light, like he hadn't seen the sun in a long time. His posture was wrong, though too still, shoulders rigid, arms hanging straight down at his sides. He was staring at me, not in the mirror. In the glass, I only saw myself. Alone. My skin crawled. For a heartbeat, my brain tried to make excuses. Angle of the light. Bad mirror. Trick of reflection. Some logical square peg I could jam into this round hole of wrong. But the man behind me wasn't some fuzzy shadow. I could see him clearly in the corner of my eye. The scuffed toe of his boots. The worn lines running down his jacket sleeves. The subtle rise and fall of his chest. No, not even that. He didn't seem to be breathing. In the mirror, my shoulders were bare. Empty tile behind me. I swallowed. My throat felt dry despite the water. I managed a small nod in the reflection, like this was normal. "Hey, man," I said, voice thin and echoing off the tiles. In the mirror, my mouth moved. Alone. Behind me, the man didn't react, didn't nod back, didn't shift. He just stood there, inches away, close enough that, in any other situation, I would have felt the warmth of another human body. I felt nothing. Cold radiated off him instead. A sinking, damp chill like standing next to a freezer with the door open. I couldn't look at him directly. Every time my eyes tried to swivel fully toward him, something in me balked. Instinct, fear, I don't know. It was like staring straight at him would cross a line I could never uncross. So I focused on the mirror, on the empty space where he should have been. Adrenaline finally kicked my brain into gear. I spun around, heart thudding so hard I tasted copper. There was no one there, just a row of 6 metal stall doors and 2 urinals, one of them out of order with a plastic bag taped over it. No tall man in a cap, no denim jacket, no boots. My breath came out in a harsh, shaky laugh that sounded too loud in the empty room. "Get it together, Cole," I muttered. "You're tired, that's all." A stall door slammed open. The sound cracked through the restroom like a gunshot. Metal banging against metal, echoing off tile. It came from the far stall, the one furthest from me. I flinched hard enough that I stumbled into the sink, shoulder clipping porcelain. Pain flared down my arm. My eyes snapped to the row of doors. The second stall door flew open. No visible force. No hand. Just a violent swing. Hinges squealing. Door bouncing off its stopper with a hollow clang. Then the next one. Bang. Then the next. They were opening toward me. One after another, closer and closer. No pause between them. No rhythm. Just this awful, accelerating series of impacts. Bang. 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 Each slam vibrated through my feet, up my spine. The lights overhead flickered in time with the hits, buzzing louder. The air felt thicker, heavy in my lungs, tinged now with a sour, moist smell, like wet cloth left in a dark basement. I stepped back toward the door without meaning to, hand groping behind me for the push bar. My skin crawled like ants were marching all over it. The fourth stall door creaked. Not a slam this time. A slow, agonizing creak, hinges protesting as the door inched open. The sound was high and thin, almost like someone breathing through their teeth. It dragged out, long and slow, setting my nerves on edge. My brain supplied the thought, "He's behind that one," and I hated it instantly. The door kept opening. Halfway, 3/4, The gap was a black rectangle, too dark for the fluorescent lights overhead. It was wrong. Like the darkness inside that stall was thicker than the shadows anywhere else in the room. The creaking stopped. Silence dropped like a weight. Somewhere above me, the light flickered, buzzing so loud it felt like it was inside my skull. My hand finally found the door bar behind me. The metal was freezing, stinging my palm. I didn't wait to see if that last stall door moved. I shoved the restroom door open so hard it banged against the outside wall. Cold fog immediately curling into the warm, chemical air. I stumbled out into it, lungs dragging in damp, icy air that burned and soothed all at once. The world outside was even thicker with gray than before. The rest area looked half-submerged in cloud. My truck was a looming shape, lights off, dark against the murk. The sodium lights above buzzed and flickered. Their halos shrunk to sickly circles. My boots slapped the concrete as I jogged toward the cab, every step feeling like something might catch my ankle from behind. I didn't look back at the restroom. Couldn't. I had the sensation, no, the certainty, that if I turned around, I'd see someone standing in the doorway watching me. Tall, still, wrong. I hit the side of my rig, grabbed the handle, and hauled myself up into the cab like a man climbing out of water. I slammed the door shut, the sound dull inside the fog, then locked it out of sheer instinct. The air in the cab smelled like me, sweat, coffee, leather, diesel. I'd never been so grateful for it. My hands shook as I jammed the key into the ignition and turned. The engine turned over, once, twice, then roared to life like normal, dash lights blooming in familiar greens and oranges. The radio popped on mid-song, some old rock tune, the singer's voice thin but normal. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and leaned back against the seat. Then I saw it. On the passenger side window, near where my shoulder would be if I were sitting there, something had disturbed the thin film of desert dust and moisture. A handprint, not on the outside, on the inside, fingers spread wide, long and narrow, palm pressed firm enough to smear the dust and fog into clear streaks. The print was too big to be mine and too high for a kid. It looked like someone had placed their hand there, watching me sleep, waiting. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen anyone in the cab, hadn't heard the door open. I would have felt the weight shift, the air move, anything. But that print was there. I stared at it, chest tight, breath shallow. Tiny droplets of condensation clung to the edges of the streaks, making the shape stand out even clearer. The longer I looked, the more wrong it seemed. The fingers looked just a little too long, the spacing just a little off, like a hand made by someone who'd seen one in a photograph but never up close. I didn't think. I threw the truck into gear and pulled out of that rest area so fast my trailer bounced, the suspension groaning. The fog closed in around me for a mile or two, swallowing Lita Junction behind me, then thinned, then vanished as abruptly as it had appeared. One moment I was driving in a gray tunnel, the next the stars were back, black sky wide open. I checked the mirrors every 30 seconds for the next 100 miles. The handprint stayed on the glass until sunrise, when the light finally warmed the cab and the condensation burned off. The dust shifted. The print faded. I've never stopped at Lita Junction again. Not once, no matter how bad I had to piss, no matter how tired I was. I'll pull over on the shoulder miles away before I'll roll into that lot. My route sometimes takes me past it, and every time I feel that same tightness in my chest, that same prickle at the back of my neck. And here's the part one try not to think about. Some nights, parked at a perfectly normal truck stop in some other state, I'll wake up in the sleeper with my heart pounding and the feeling that someone is standing just on the other side of the curtain, too still, too close. I'll lie there, holding my breath, listening. The cab will be silent. But when I finally pull the curtain back, just an inch, the first place my eyes go is always that passenger side window. Twice now, on cold nights, I've seen the same thing. A fresh handprint. On the inside. I've heard windstorms out in the desert that could knock a full rig sideways. Seen dust devils crawl across the flats like living things. Out there between Beatty and Goldfield, the wind has teeth. It chews at your trailer, rattles every loose bolt, whistles through the seams of your cab like a warning you're not meant to ignore. But there was one night, The kind you don't forget because something inside you knows it wasn't weather. My name's Rick. I run long haul out west, I-15, US 95, Tonopah down to Vegas. Been doing it 15 years. I was northbound on 95, climbing out of Amargosa toward Goldfield. It was around 11:40 p.m., the kind of desert night where the air is cold enough to sting your lungs, and the sky is so clear it feels hollow. You look up and see stars that don't twinkle, they just stare back. I had a dry van behind me, half-loaded. Electronics. Sturdy stuff. Nothing that should make a sound. The wind picked up maybe 20 miles south of Goldfield. At first, it was just a steady push against the trailer, nothing unusual. The wheel vibrated lightly in my hands, the rubber humming on the pavement. My headlights cut through low waves of blowing sand, the beams scattering across the asphalt like static. Then it shifted. The gusts weren't smooth. They came in pulses, sharp and uneven, like something hitting the side of the trailer with open hands. My side mirrors jittered with each hit. The whole rig shuddered like it was bracing against more than just air. I cracked the window an inch. Cold desert wind knifed in, carrying dust and the smell of dry sage. But it carried something else too, thin and buried, almost too faint to notice at first. It sounded like voices, not words, not talking, more like the guttural strain of someone screaming through clenched teeth. Distant, carried on the wind, dragged and stretched like fabric torn too thin. I shut the window fast. Bad crosswind, I told myself. Just tricks of the air. But the CB cut out right then, mid-transmission. Someone was talking about a way station up near Tonopah, and suddenly the channel hissed, crackled, then went dead. Display stayed lit. No sound. The trailer kicked again. Hard. The whole cab shook. My coffee sloshed in the cup holder. I checked my mirrors. Left mirror. Empty highway behind me, fading into a gray veil of blowing dust. Right mirror. Nothing but swirling sand and darkness. The sagebrush on the shoulder whipped like something was crawling through it. Another gust hit. Stronger this time. My teeth rattled. But under the wind's roar, I heard something else. Closer now, inside the vibrations running through the trailer. Voices. Dozens of them. Screaming. Long, rising wails layered over each other. Almost human, but wrong. Too many, too sharp, too constant. Like someone had recorded a crowd in full panic, then twisted the audio until it frayed at the edges. I gripped the wheel tighter. My palms were sweating despite the cold. I kept telling myself it was just turbulence hitting the panels, but the more I listened, the less it sounded like metal. It sounded alive. About 5 minutes south of Goldfield, a warning light flickered on my dash. Trailer door ajar. Impossible. I checked the lock myself. Seal intact. No reason for it to open. The wind slammed into me again, this time from the right. The rig drifted a foot into the opposite lane before I corrected. My heart was hammering against my ribs. The screams got louder. I couldn't pretend anymore. It wasn't the wind. The trailer itself was vibrating like something inside was pounding with fists and elbows trying to get out. The rivets in the paneling buzzed like angry hornets. The metal rang with every hit. Then I heard it. Bang, bang, bang. 3 heavy blows against the inside of the trailer. Not freight shifting, not pallets falling. These were rhythmic, purposeful, like knocking. That was it. I eased off the throttle and pulled onto the shoulder, air brakes letting out a long, trembling sigh. Dust swirled around the headlights. My hazard lights blinked red into nothingness. I sat there, engine idling, listening. The wind shrieked around the cab. But beneath it, beneath everything, there was a faint, steady chorus of voices, rising and falling, almost chanting now. My skin prickled. The cab suddenly felt too warm, the air thick and stale, like someone else had been breathing inside it. I grabbed my flashlight. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe stupidity. Or maybe some part of me believed I'd open those doors and see a pallet tipped over, a few busted boxes, something normal that would silence all the other explanations clawing at my mind. The wind fought me all the way to the back of the trailer. Sand whipped against my jeans. The cold dug through my sleeves like needles. My breath came out in white bursts, vanishing instantly in the gale. The lock was still sealed tight, but the metal around it vibrated, pulsing like a heartbeat. My fingers shook as I broke the seal and threw the latch. The doors groaned open against the wind, and I raised the flashlight into the dark interior. Boxes, just boxes, strapped, stacked, secured. No movement, no sound. The air inside was still. I let out a breath that felt too shaky to be relief. Then the wind stopped. Not gradually, instantly, like someone hit a switch. 1 second the desert was roaring, the next it was dead silent. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. My flashlight beam seemed too loud, the hum of the idling engine too sharp. That's when I heard it. A whisper, right behind me. You opened it. I spun so fast I almost slipped in the sand. My light slashed across empty highway, across the scrub, across the side of my cab. No one there. No footprints leading away. No shadows moving. Just empty desert. But the sand around my truck wasn't empty. Footprints had appeared. Dozens of them. Maybe more. Circling the rig in uneven rings. Barefoot impressions, small children or women, too small for any grown man. Pressed deep into the sand as if made by someone running. Fresh, crisp, and not a single one led toward my truck. They all led away, as if those, whatever they were, had been standing around me, encircling me, waiting. My chest constricted so hard I couldn't breathe. My legs moved on their own. I ran for the cab, slammed the door, locked it twice, and threw the truck into gear. Gravel spit under my tires as I pulled back onto the road. The trailer groaned behind me, metal flexing like it was grateful to be closed again. I didn't slow down until the lights of Goldfield rose out of the dark like a dying campfire. I parked at the first gas station I saw, shut off the engine, and just sat there with my forehead pressed to the wheel, breathing like I'd sprinted a mile. I checked the trailer the next morning in daylight. No footprints, no marks, no warning light, but on the inside of the trailer doors, high up near the roof, were 4 long drag marks, like small fingers had scraped downward through the dust. I've never stopped on that stretch again, and every time the wind picks up near Goldfield, even just a little, I swear I can hear something buried inside it, screaming or warning. I've hauled loads through Nevada for most of my career, and I'll tell you straight, nothing gets stranger than that stretch near Gerlach during Burning Man week. You get all kinds out there. Dust-covered RVs, bicycles glowing like jellyfish, people wandering the highway in outfits that look like they crawled out of a fever dream. Most of it's harmless. Most of it. My name's Luca. I run a 389 Peterbilt with a sleeper and a reefer trailer. I've been doing long haul for almost 19 years. I've seen rollover wrecks, dust storms that erase the road, and more weird desert hitchhikers than I care to count. I know what's normal out there and what's not. This was late one night, maybe 1:20 a.m., on NV 447 heading south toward Fernley. Weather was clear. Air was cold enough that every breath fogged the cab glass for a second. My headlights cut across the empty basin, twin cones of white sweeping over miles of dust, sagebrush, and old alkali flats. The sky was huge, moonless, starshot, endless. The only sound was the steady hum of the reefer and the faint rattle of the dash. CB was quiet, too quiet, actually. Burning Man week usually means chatter. Lost people, drunks, folks asking for directions back to Reno. Tonight, nothing but static, like the whole desert was holding its breath. About 15 miles past Gerlach, I saw movement off on the right shoulder. A lone figure walking the edge of the desert. I slowed, instinct taking over before thought. You see someone out there alone at night, you check if they're in trouble. The road shimmered slightly from cold, the beams stretching ahead. That's when the shape stepped closer, out of the dark. And he glowed, not like someone wearing LEDs or holding a lantern. This glow came from inside him, a deep orange pulse, like the inside of a furnace. His whole body had this ember look, skin like cracked charcoal, thin fissures running along his arms and chest, bright heat glowing through them. His hair looked burned, curled and blackened. His feet left no prints, just disturbed dust that smoldered faintly before cooling back to gray. At first I thought it was a trick of the headlights, a mask maybe, body paint, some art thing. But as I rolled closer, that heat hit my windshield. It warped the glass. Not like fog or condensation, the damn windshield rippled. The air in front of it shimmered like I'd driven too close to the mouth of a blast furnace. My cab filled with the smell of scorched rubber and heated metal. Still, I slowed. Habit is a hell of a thing. People need help, you help. He stepped right up to the shoulder, turning his head toward me. His eyes weren't eyes. They were hollow pits, glowing from deep inside, flickering like coals pushed together. And the cracks across his face pulsed with light every time he took a breath, if it was breathing. I stopped 50 feet from him. He leaned toward my window, the orange light washing over the glass. The cab temperature shot up instantly, a choking, suffocating heat that made sweat break out across my scalp. His mouth opened. Inside was nothing but more light, molten bright. And he whispered, voice crackling like burning branches, "Take me back." The sound wasn't loud, but it reverberated through my chest, shaking something deep inside me. The smell hit me next, smoke and something sweeter under it, like burned plastic or burned skin. "Take me back." The words didn't sound like a request. They sounded like a warning. My right hand moved before my brain did, hit the throttle hard. The tires screamed, gravel spitting behind me. The cab lurched forward, engine roaring as I bolted down the empty road. I didn't check my mirrors, didn't want to see if he followed. But something bright flickered behind me, lighting up the cab interior for a split second. Then it vanished. I drove all the way to Wadsworth without stopping. Didn't breathe right until I hit the gas station, the buzzing fluorescent lights overhead looking like salvation. When I stepped out of the cab, the cold felt like a shock. Cut through my clothes, grounded me. The night was silent except for the hum of the station lights and the faint pop of cooling metal on my engine. A mechanic buddy of mine was working the overnight shift there. I waved him over to ask if my windshield looked warped or cracked from the outside. I was already trying to convince myself it had been heat mirage, fatigue, something reasonable. He didn't answer. He walked straight to the driver's side door and crouched. "Jesus, Luca." I leaned over him and saw it. Burn marks, blackened, blistered patches on the paint, the exact shape of hands. One near the bottom, one by the window, one pressed against the metal just inches from my seat. 5 fingers each, human-sized. The scorch was so deep it had bubbled the paint outward, as if someone with burning hot skin had grabbed the metal from the outside and pushed inward with all their strength. The edges were still warm to the touch, hours after the encounter. Nobody at the station could explain it. Nobody wanted to. I drove the rest of my shift with both windows cracked, even though it was near freezing. I couldn't stand the smell of hot metal trapped in the cab. And here's the part one don't talk about. 3 days later, when I was parked by Pyramid Lake, I woke at 3:11 a.m. to a bright orange pulse lighting up the inside of my sleeper. Not steady, not headlights, a flicker, rhythmic, like someone breathing embers in and out. I held still, didn't move, didn't breathe. After maybe 10 seconds, it faded. The air cooled. In the morning, I checked the door again. Another handprint had appeared on the metal, higher this time, like someone had been reaching for the window. I don't stop for hitchhikers anymore. Not anywhere near Gerlach. Not even at noon. Some fires aren't meant to be rekindled. And some things that burn in the desert want company. I've been driving long haul for close to 20 years now, mostly the western corridors, I-80, 93, 50, the lonely stretches where the road goes dead straight for miles and the sky looks too big for one lifetime. I've seen strange things out there. Mirages that looked like cities, phantom lights on desert ridges, even a guy walking barefoot down US 6 at 2 in the morning wearing nothing but a hotel towel. But nothing ever put its hands on my cab. Not until that night near Wendover. My name's Mason. I run a Freightliner Cascadia with a high roof sleeper. Reefer work out of Salt Lake, running perishables to Sacramento and back. The night this happened, I was westbound out of Wyoming, pushing through the last leg toward Nevada. It was early November, clear but cold. Windshield frost creeping along the edges even with the defroster running hot. Around 2:30 a.m., I hit that final stretch before Wendover. Highway empty. CB mostly dead except for one guy mumbling about elk near wells. My thermos coffee was burnt, the kind that coats your tongue with bitterness, but it kept me awake. The cab smelled like diesel-soaked gloves, old receipts, and the cinnamon air freshener I hung months ago that still somehow lingered. About 10 miles out, I passed the Old Way station. Anyone who drives that corridor knows it. A squat concrete booth with faded blue trim, chain-link fencing sagging on one side, the sign out front sun-bleached and cracked. State Way Station, closed. Hasn't been operational in over a decade. No power lines connected. No security lights. No generator hum. Just a dead building waiting to rot. I'd never stopped there before. Most drivers won't. But that night my hours were bleeding out and my eyelids felt like sandpaper. The next official rest stop was a ways ahead, and I didn't want to risk a microsleep at 70 miles per hour. So I pulled off onto the gravel shoulder near the old scale pad. Engine idling low, headlights throwing pale cones across broken concrete and frost-silvered weeds. I set the brakes. The air hissed, filling the cab with steam-white fog. The warmth of the sleeper beckoned, stale but comforting. The desert was silent, total flat silence. No wind, no insects, no distant hum of traffic. The kind of silence that vibrates in your ears like a held breath. I crawled into the sleeper, boots still on, and let myself drift. I don't know how long I slept, but when I woke, my cab was cold. Not just engine off cold, wrong cold. Like someone had opened a door, let the night pour in, then closed it again. My breath fogged the air in front of me. The small fan above the bunk spun lazily, even though it wasn't turned on. Then I saw the light, a dull yellow glow shining through my windshield. I thought at first it was a truck pulling in, headlights angled weird. But when I sat up and leaned forward, wiping frost from the inside of the windshield, the truth hit me like a jolt to the spine. The way station booth was lit. Fluorescent lights, harsh white-yellow, flickering the way old tubes do. That building has no power, no grid, no generator, nothing. But at 3:07 a.m., the whole booth was glowing like someone had flipped a breaker. Then a figure stepped inside. A silhouette, tall, stiff posture, standing behind the glass where the scale operator used to sit. The glow behind it was so bright the figure was completely black, like a cutout in the light. Slowly, it lifted one arm and waved me forward. My tired brain reacted before the rest of me did, that muscle memory reflex from years of pulling into active scales. I flicked the headlights on, rolled down the window an inch to clear condensation, and eased my rig forward toward the pad. The gravel crunched under my tires. My trailer creaked. The booth light flickered brighter. Halfway across the pad, something snapped into place inside my head. This station's been dead for 12 years. I hit the brakes so hard the cab lurched. When I looked up again, the lights in the booth were off. Not dim, not fading, gone. The building was pitch black the way it had been before, a concrete box in the middle of nowhere. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Engine idled rough beneath me, shivering like it sensed something I didn't. Then, tap, soft, but close. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, steady, like someone marking time. The sound came from my driver's side window, not the outside, right next to my head. I turned. At first, I saw nothing but the dark glass reflecting my own face. Pale, eyes wide, breath fogging. Then something shifted in the reflection. A second shape, taller, leaning in from just outside the door. Tap. The sound vibrated through the glass. My whole scalp prickled. The tapping was too slow, too deliberate. No drunk hitchhiker, no prank, no animal. My hand hovered over the ignition key, but I didn't dare turn it. Something in my gut, deep primal, told me any sudden movement would be a mistake. Another tap, but this time, the glass dented inward, just the slightest bow, like a knuckle made of something heavier than bone. I forced myself to look directly at the window instead of the reflection. There were fingers pressed against the glass. Not quite human. Too long. Too thin. The joints slightly off, bent at angles that made my stomach twist. They weren't smudging the frost. They were pressing through it. The glass fogged only where my breath hit it. But around those fingers, the frost receded, curling away like it was scared to touch them. Tap. I saw the fingertip this time, dark, like charred wood, but not burned. More like something molded into the shape of a hand but not built for holding things. Each nail tapered to a dull point, not sharp, but strong. I snapped. Instinct overrode fear. I slammed the truck into gear, released the brakes, and floored it. Gravel shot backward in a spray, clattering against my trailer. The cab jerked violently, fishtailing before straightening on the asphalt. In the mirror, for a split second, I saw something standing beside the pad. Tall, still, a silhouette darker than the night around it. It didn't move, didn't chase, just watched. The booth remained dark. No lights, no figure, just the abandoned building everyone knows to avoid. I didn't stop until I hit the Wendover truck stop, and even then it took 10 minutes before I could pry my fingers off the wheel. My hands shook so violently I spilled coffee everywhere. The clerk asked if I was okay. All I could say was, something touched my window. By sunrise, I'd convinced myself it was a dream, exhaustion, microsleep, hallucination. But when I stepped out of the cab, the cold morning air biting at my face, I looked at the driver's side window again. There were marks on the glass, for oval impressions, perfectly spaced, deep enough to warp the reflection, like fingerprints pressed into warm fog. But the weird thing, the glass wasn't fogged. The marks were melted into the surface. Not scratches, heat distortions. Permanent. I tried scrubbing them. Nothing. Buffing. Nothing. They're still there. Sometimes, when I'm backing into a dock at night and the yard lights hit the angle just right, those marks glow faintly, like whatever touched my window left something behind. And every time I pass that stretch near Wendover now, I keep my eyes dead ahead. Because I know if I look at that old way station, I'll see the booth lit again, and something inside waving me forward. I've taken bad detours before, washed out bridges, fire closures, jackknifed rigs blocking entire highways, but nothing prepared me for the night my GPS routed me through moon rocks. My name's Avery. I run a Kenworth T680 with a dry van, mostly West Coast lanes. I'm used to long stretches of desert, back roads, and the kind of lonely silence that can make a man talk to his steering wheel just to hear something human. But this wasn't one of those nights where the only danger is fatigue. I was hauling a light load from Reno up toward Winnemucca. Weather was clear, air cold enough to sting the inside of your nose. It was around 12:45 a.m. when traffic ahead of me came to a dead stop. CB chatter said it was a multi-vehicle rollover. Highway shut down for hours. I didn't want to burn my clock sitting there, so I checked the GPS. It suggested a detour through the Moon Rocks recreation area, off-road patches, rough access roads, old dirt trails connecting to a frontage road that would drop me back onto pavement. Normally, I'd never take a rig off-road, but the map showed it as passable, and I was tired enough to believe it. Moon Rocks isn't a place you want to be at night. Pale granite boulders, rolling dunes, dry gullies that look like something clawed them out centuries ago. Even in daylight, the place feels wrong. Too quiet, too empty, like a canyon that forgot how to echo. I eased onto the dirt access road, the cab shivering as the pavement gave way to uneven ground. Dust rose behind me in thick clouds, illuminated by my headlights like swirling smoke. Inside the cab, every loose item rattled. The air smelled like hot dust and rubber. The steering wheel vibrated constantly under my hands. The CB went silent, not just quiet, dead. No static, no distant voices, just a flat, suffocating nothingness. The road twisted between rock formations that rose like skeletal hands from the earth. My headlights stretched their shadows across the dunes, long and warped. At first, I thought those shadows were mine. Then I noticed they were moving wrong. Shapes darted between the rocks, low to the ground, fast, too fast for anything on foot. I leaned forward, peering through the dusty windshield. The shadows kept pace with my trailer. 3 of them, maybe 4. I tried to rationalize dirt bikers, maybe ATVs, local kids messing around. But these shapes weren't tall enough, weren't upright enough. They ran in bursts, skittering sideways, dropping low to the ground, then rising again in jerky, unnatural motions. I picked up speed. The dirt road bucked the cab with every rut and ridge. My teeth clicked together from the impact. The shadows matched me perfectly. Something scraped against the trailer wall. A dry, dragging sound. Metal on metal, but not like a branch. More like claws. Long strokes, then short ones, then a scraping that moved upward. I checked the mirror. Dust. Nothing else. Then something hit the roof. A heavy thud that shook the entire rig. The roof flexed, dust raining down inside the cab through the ceiling vent. My skin crawled. Whatever was up there, it was big enough to shift the truck's center of gravity. I gripped the wheel tighter. My palms were slick with sweat despite the cold air blowing through the vents. Another scrape, this time across the very top of the cab, dragging toward the trailer. Long, slow, deliberate. I floored the accelerator. The engine roared, tires spinning for a second before catching traction. The truck surged forward, bouncing hard as I tore through the trail, headlights carving wild swaths across dunes and rock. Behind me, the shadows scattered. All but one. I felt it before I saw it. Weight shifting on the roof. Something walking along it. For steps, then 3 faster ones, then a scuttling vibration that made the metal creak overhead. Like it had too many limbs, too much reach. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other hovering over the air horn, as if that would do anything. The frontage road appeared ahead, a dark strip of pavement like salvation. I hit it at nearly 50, the suspension screaming as the truck slammed onto level ground. The force jolted the entire rig. Something on the roof slipped. I heard claws skitter across sheet metal, searching for grip. And then, silence. No weight, no scraping, no movement. The road stretched empty and black behind me. The desert faded into darkness. I drove until I hit a wide turnout and pulled over, heart still hammering in my throat. I left the engine running, part fear, part instinct. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped out, and tilted my head up. The trailer looked normal at first. Then the light hit the roof. My whole stomach turned. Long gouges ran across the metal. Deep claw marks etched in parallel lines, some crossing each other, some so raked they'd peeled curls of aluminum outward like ribbons from a can. The scratches were spaced too wide for any animal, too deliberate for wind, too deep for anything without strength far beyond human. The marks on the cab roof were worse. Some of them started near the center and ran upward toward the sky, like whatever had been on my truck had launched itself off. I checked the ground. No prints, no dust disturbed, nothing, but the trailer roof was ruined. Back in the cab, the heater was blowing full force, but I still felt cold. The kind of cold that settles into your bones. When I finally made it to Winnemucca the next morning, the shop guy climbed onto the roof to assess the damage. He climbed down slower than he went up, face pale, eyes confused. "This wasn't branches," he said quietly. "This wasn't an animal. I've never seen metal torn like that." I didn't tell him about the shadows, or the weight on the roof, or the scraping, but that night, in my sleeper, I woke to a faint sound above me. Not wind, not settling metal, just the barest whisper of movement, like something testing where it used to stand. I've driven long enough to know when someone's following me. You get a sense for it, the pacing, the distance, the rhythm of another driver's mistakes. I can tell when someone's tailgating, when someone's drunk, when someone's trying to draft off my trailer to save fuel. But what followed me out of Ely that night wasn't a driver. It wasn't anything human. My name's Grant. I run reefer loads across Nevada, Utah, and Idaho, mostly night hauls. I'm used to empty highways, black desert horizons, and the kind of silence that can make you hear your own heartbeat louder than the engine. But this was different. This was the first time the highway felt like it was watching me. It started around 11:40 p.m. I had just left Ely, heading west on US 50, America's loneliest road. Weather was clear, air cold enough to fog the inside of the windshield. The cab smelled like diesel from my gloves and 2-hour-old coffee sitting in the cup holder. The hum of the reefer was steady behind me. My headlights stretched out ahead, pale beams cutting through the dark like knives. I checked my mirror. A pair of headlights crested the rise behind me. Nothing unusual until I saw the color. Too white, too bright, almost blue like arc lamps or welding torches. They didn't bounce on the uneven pavement. They didn't adjust like a real vehicle hitting dips or curves. They stayed level, a perfect horizontal glow, following me down the long decline like they were gliding. I eased back on the throttle, dropped from 65 to 55. The lights slowed with me. I changed lanes out of habit, even though I didn't need to. The road was empty. The lights changed lanes exactly with me. Exactly. No drift, no hesitation, just mirror-perfect motion. A prickling sensation crawled up the back of my neck. I flicked on the CB. Westbound out of Ely, you got a tail? Someone riding my ass with high beams. Anyone else seeing this? Nothing but static. Not normal static. Cold static. Like the gain was turned way down, like the radio was trying not to transmit anything back. I tried again, switching channels. Each one clicked through with a faint hiss, dead, empty, as if the whole desert had decided to go silent. Another glance in the mirror. Headlights still behind me. Same unnatural white glow. But when my eyes focused directly on them, the lights vanished. The mirror reflected nothing but highway. I blinked, leaned in closer, squinting. Nothing. Then I looked back at the road ahead. The glow returned behind me instantly, reflected faintly off the inside of the cab, like something was there, but only when I wasn't looking at it. I tested it, looked in the mirror, gone. Looked at the windshield, periphery catching the back window, there again. A knot tightened in my chest. Around midnight, the road curved around a long valley. I flicked on my turn signal out of reflex and eased onto the shoulder, crunching gravel under my tires. Hazard lights blinking red-orange. The glow behind me slowed, stopped, 40 yards back, still shining. I looked directly into the side mirror. Nothing. I looked at the dash, letting my eyes drift away. The glow returned, closer now. I felt it before I saw it. A pressure in the air, like someone was standing right behind my seat. The temperature in the cab dipped hard, breath coming out in tight white plumes. I threw the truck back into gear. The glow followed instantly. I pushed to 65, then 70. Not smart with a trailer, but the highway was dead straight. My hands were slick with sweat, grip tight on the wheel. The cab vibrations rattled through my forearms. The lights kept pace, never gaining, never falling back, just hovering behind me like a shark shadow. Then everything changed at once. The glow behind me surged, fast, too fast. It shot up the road, a white blur flooding the mirrors, swallowing the darkness. I braced for impact. There was no impact. The glow hit the back of the trailer and passed straight through it. My whole rig shuddered as the light phased through metal, washing the cab in white fire before collapsing into darkness in front of me. The temperature inside the cab plummeted. My breath froze mid-exhale. My skin prickled with pins and needles. The steering wheel numbed under my hands. And in the cold, dead quiet that followed, the CB crackled once. A single chirp, then a whisper. Close. Inside the cab. Too close. Still behind you. My blood ran cold. The whisper didn't come from the speaker. It came from right behind my headrest. Like someone leaning forward from the sleeper, lips brushing the edge of my ear. I snapped my eyes to the mirror. Empty road. Then, in the corner of the glass, faint, almost invisible, two white orbs hovered at the far edge of the darkness. Not headlights this time. Not symmetrical. Not even-sized. Just two glowing, floating shapes watching. I slammed the curtain to the sleeper shut without thinking. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear the engine. The rest of the drive into Fallon was a blur. Just white lines, shaking hands, and the feeling that something was riding just behind the trailer spray. When I finally pulled into a lit truck stop, I killed the engine fast, the sudden silence agonizing. I stepped out into the cold, letting my boots crunch on the frozen gravel. The lights of the station buzzed overhead. I walked around the trailer. No dents, no heat damage, no cracks, but the dust on the rear door told a different story. 2 streaks, narrow, elongated, perfectly vertical, dragged straight down the metal from top to bottom, like something tall had run its fingers down the trailer as it passed through it. The marks were burned into the dust, but not the metal. When I touched them, the streaks were ice cold, so cold it burned. I wiped the dust with my glove. The marks came back in the morning. Same place, same shape. Sometimes, on night hauls west of Ely, I'll see a faint glow rise behind me on the long straightaway. It never catches me, never speaks again, just keeps its distance, like it's waiting for me to stop looking in the mirrors, or waiting for the moment I finally look away too long. I fueled up in Beatty more times than I can count. It's one of those little desert towns that feels like a checkpoint. Last chance to get gas, coffee, or a working restroom before you commit to the long dark haul toward Tonopah. Nothing fancy, nothing scary. Just a place where dead-tired truckers refill their tanks and their veins with caffeine. But not that night. Not at 2:30 a.m. Not at the station that shouldn't have been open. My name's Ray. I've been running long haul for 18 years. Reefers, flatbeds, hazmat tankers. I've driven through sandstorms, whiteouts, and more nights alone in the desert than I can tally. I trust my instincts. They've kept me alive more than once. I was hauling frozen goods from Vegas up toward Fallon. November chill, sky moonless, road empty except for the steady droning hum of my engine. The air inside the cab smelled like stale coffee, diesel-soaked gloves, and that faint freezer chemical smell that creeps through every reefer over time. Headlights cut through the darkness in narrow white tunnels. Around 2:25 a.m., my low-fuel alarm pinged. Beatty was coming up in 10 minutes. I'd stopped there hundreds of times. The glow of the town is always the same. A handful of neon signs, a diner that somehow stays open, and that old gas station near the edge of town with its buzzing overhead lamps and a faded mural on the wall. But as I rolled in, something felt off. Too quiet, too still. Beatty usually has late-night wanderers, RV folks, off-roaders, someone. Tonight, the streets were dead. The lights buzzed overhead, flickering weakly. The air smelled dry and metallic, like dust and cold steel. The gas station lights were on. Bright, unnaturally bright. I pulled up to pump 3. The digital screen lit up with a soft beep, glowing pale green. The overhang lights hummed overhead, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. The wind was barely there, just enough to stir dust in soft spirals. I stepped out, boots hitting the concrete with a dull echo. Something about the air felt heavier than it should have, the cold sinking deeper than normal desert night chill. My breath fogged in front of me, vanishing quick. Instinct said something was off. But fuel is fuel, and I was running low. I walked inside. The bell above the door gave a single chime. Sharp, metallic, too loud in the empty store. The lights buzzed overhead. The aisles were neat, stocked, cleaner than I'd ever seen them. Too clean, like nobody had touched anything in years. The clerk stood behind the counter. Middle-aged guy, dark hair, uniform shirt tucked in neatly. He looked normal, until he moved. He turned his head to look at me, and his neck bent too far. Not a little too far. A full shiver too far, like a mannequin head someone twisted 70 degrees past human limits. No crack, no pain reaction, just a smooth, unnatural rotation. His eyes locked onto mine, white, unblinking, clear but not alive, like glass marbles set into a face that learned how to mimic a smile without understanding what it meant. "Pump 3 is ready," he said, but the sound didn't match the movement of his mouth. His lips moved slow, a half-second behind the words. The voice sounded layered, like 2 recordings slightly out of sync. Too calm, too smooth, like the cadence of someone who'd learned speech from listening, not living. My skin crawled. The air felt colder. I tried to play it cool. "Thanks," I muttered. backing slowly toward the door. He smiled wider, too wide. His cheeks stretched until small cracks formed at the corners of his mouth. No blood, just skin pulling wrong over bone. His left eye twitched, not like a spasm, more like someone flicking a switch, turning it on and off. "You're welcome." The lights above him flickered. Once, twice, every bulb in perfect sequence, left to right, like a wave. I stepped toward the exit. My boots felt too loud on the tile. Halfway there, the clerk spoke again. "You forgot your receipt." His mouth didn't move at all this time. Something behind the counter shifted. Shelf items rattled softly, like something large brushing past them. I didn't look, couldn't. My pulse hammered in my ears. The bells above the door didn't chime when I pushed through. No sound at all, not even wind. I ran. Didn't think. Didn't look back. I sprinted across the concrete, the pump still humming as fuel poured into my tank. The hose jerked from the weight, clattering against metal. I didn't stop. I threw myself into the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the door to the shop opened. I saw him in my mirror. The clerk stepped outside into the cold desert air. He moved stiff, like joints bending for the first time. His head tilted at an angle that made my spine knot up. Then he raised his hand and waved. The hand twisted all the way around, not rotated at the wrist. The entire hand rotated a full circle before snapping back into place with a soft, rubbery pop I heard even from inside my cab. I floored the accelerator, pump nozzle still wedged in my tank, ripping it free. Gasoline sprayed across the lot as I tore out onto the road, tires skidding on the cold asphalt. I didn't slow until I was well past town. Didn't breathe right until the lights of Beatty disappeared behind me. I didn't sleep that morning. Drove straight to Fallon, stomach in knots, mind racing. Played back what I saw again and again. When daylight hit, I doubted myself. Desert fatigue. Night driving. Eyes playing tricks. I made the mistake of checking. At my next run, 2 days later, I passed through Beatty again. The gas station was closed. Boarded up. Dust-coated. No power. Windows blacked out. A paper notice was taped to the door. Closed permanently since 2016. The pump I used was dry, covered in sand, condemned. But when I pulled into the truck stop north of town for a break, the attendant noticed something on my rig. "Hey driver, looks like you spilled some fuel," he said. I stepped out. There were prints on my driver's side door, human-shaped, perfectly outlined, pressed into the dust. But the fingers were twisted backward, every one of them bent in the wrong direction. I wiped them clean. They came back the next morning. Same shape, same angle, like a hand that wasn't meant to move forward had tried to follow me out of Beatty. Would you like me to generate more stories like this one? In one seamless motion, the lead truck moved a half-lane left. The one beside it matched the movement, and within 3 seconds I was boxed in. One in front, one behind, one to my left, just off my driver's door. One to my right, barely a few yards from my passenger side. None of them touched me, not once. The spacing between us stayed so exact it made my eyes ache trying to measure it. Like they'd marked my truck on an invisible grid and locked into position around it. I tapped the brakes, heart thumping. My rig slowed 2 miles per hour. They slowed 2 miles per hour. I sped back up. They followed. It didn't matter what I did. I was in a steel coffin with 4 black shadows as the walls. It went on like that. 5 minutes, maybe 10. Time got weird. The light outside the cab held in that pre-dawn murk, as if the sun had stalled below the horizon. Sweat beaded on my neck, sliding down the curve of my spine under my shirt. My fingers went numb on the wheel, slick with fear. I tried the horn. The sound died halfway through the first blast. Came out thin and sickly, like someone honking from underwater. My chest tightened. I slapped at the dash, checked my gauges. Everything looked normal. Oil pressure fine, voltage stable, RPM steady. But nothing felt normal. The air in the cab had a smell now. Not my usual mix of coffee and stale fries. This was sharp, metallic, almost like hot copper wire or ozone before a lightning strike. Every breath tasted like it might cut my lungs on the way in. I told myself again and again, keep the wheel straight. Don't panic. They haven't hit you. They haven't pushed you. Whatever this is, it'll end. It did. All at once. No warning. No turn signal. The 4 trucks swerved off the road. 1 second they were there, black walls hemming me in, gliding across cracked asphalt. The next, they swung right, in unison, onto the desert. Except they shouldn't have been able to. There was no shoulder there. No gentle graded slope. Just a low embankment of packed dirt and scrub and rock. Any normal vehicle hitting that at highway speed would have bounced, jolted, thrown a driver through the windshield or torn an axle clean off. These didn't bounce. They simply departed the pavement like it was a suggestion, not a surface. No dust plume, no flying gravel. They moved out over the desert floor, still in perfect formation, still silent, engines humming at a pitch I felt more than heard. My truck rolled on, free, my headlights slowly regaining their strength, flooding the empty highway with light. I watched them in my side mirror. Within seconds, distance swallowed them. Not in the way normal objects shrink, but in a strange, wrong way, like they were sliding away from more than just me, further into some depth I couldn't see. The desert out there was flat, nothing to hide behind for miles, but their shapes faded, colors draining, until they were just gone. No dust, no trace. My GPS screen blinked, then sprang back to life. The CB crackled with a sudden burst of normal static. A driver somewhere, miles away, complaining about a way station. I drove until my hands stopped shaking enough that I trusted them. I hit a small gas station and diner near Ely just after full daylight. The sign buzzed, neon flickering weakly. The place smelled like burnt bacon and bad coffee and humanity. It was the best thing I'd ever smelled in my life. I must have looked worse than I thought, because the waitress frowned when I ordered. "You all right, Han?" she asked, topping off my cup. "Long night," I said, which was true in all the wrong ways. I was halfway through my eggs when a state trooper walked in. Clean uniform, mirror sunglasses pushed up on his head. That slow, measured way cops move when they're on duty. He scanned the room, then let his gaze settle on me. "You the one with the Peterbilt out front?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, wiping my mouth. "That a problem?" He shook his head slightly, pulling out the chair across from me. The vinyl squeaked as he Saturday, "Caught your plates on my way in. Saw you came from 50. He studied my face, the way you look at a wreck to see if it's still moving. "You look like you've seen a ghost, friend." "Something like that," I muttered, fingers tightening around my coffee mug. Weird convoy out there. Black trucks. No plates. No drivers, far as I could see. Boxed me in for a while. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he exhaled slowly, like he'd been hoping I'd say anything else. "You saw him," he said. It wasn't a question. "Who?" I asked. He glanced around the diner. The waitress was at the far end, refilling sugar containers. The only other customer was an old man with a newspaper and a hearing aid turned off. The trooper leaned in slightly. "We call it the silent convoy," he said, "for lack of a better name. Most don't see them. Of the ones who do..." He trailed off, looking down at the table. A vein in his jaw ticked. "Most don't make it here to talk about it." My stomach turned. "What happens?" "Sometimes we find their rigs in a ditch," he said quietly. "Sometimes parked neat on the shoulder, empty. Sometimes we don't find anything at all. Just a busted stretch of guardrail and some skid marks that go out into the desert and don't leave tracks. We get reports, stories. But you're the first in a long time I've heard talk about them boxing you in and letting you go." "Why me?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked back up at me. There was pity in his eyes and something else. Fear. "Maybe they weren't interested," he said. "Maybe you were just in the way." He hesitated, then added, "Or maybe they marked you." The word hung there, heavy. On my next run, a week later, I checked my rig before hitting 50 again. Walk around, lights, tires, the usual. When I got to the rear doors of the trailer, I found something that wasn't usual. for parallel lines, not scratched, not painted, impressed into the metal, faint but visible. The lines were perfectly straight, spaced evenly apart, the exact width of tire tracks side by side, only there was nothing that could have made them at that height. They were about level with my chest. I ran my fingers over them. The metal felt colder there. Not ice cold, just a few degrees less than the rest of the door. Enough to raise goosebumps along my arm. I've seen those marks 3 times since then. They fade only to come back somewhere else on the rig. Side panel, fuel tank, once on the hood itself. Always the same width. Always the same number. For I still drive Highway 50. Sometimes you don't get a choice. A route's a route, and freight doesn't care about your nightmares. But I don't drive it the same way anymore. Every time the pre-dawn light starts to thin the stars, every time my CB goes quiet for a little too long, every time my GPS hesitates on the map, I feel my heart climb up into my throat. And every so often, in the mirror, way back on the horizon, I swear I see 4 dark shapes moving in perfect formation. No lights, no plates, just matte black shadows, gliding like they're on rails, closing the distance inch by inch, waiting to see if this is the night they're interested.